Coming in at number 6, our first shop partner interview on our podcast, Chris Petty of the High Frontier. Chris Petty has a huge passion for space designs, and he also is an amazing graphic designer. So he created this very unique branded shop with designs that have never been seen before for this community. One of the things he mentions is a lot of the designs are too kind of corporate, the classic ones you always see, the NASA type logos. And he wanted to have something more unique to that community. It's something more unique to his passions. Chris, from an early age, developed this passion for space. And as he grew into his career of graphic design, he wanted to find a way to kind of combine those two. And he found out how to do that through Spreadshop, which is amazing to hear those type of stories of how people actually take their passions and create something where they can actually make a living. Chris Petty is an incredibly awesome dude. Check his shop out. Go check out his designs. Check out the interview. Check him out. He's out of this world.
Hey, we're here with Chris Petty of the High Frontier shop. He's actually our very first shop owner that we're going to interview on this podcast. We're really excited to have him. Hi, Chris.
Hi, good to speak to you.
So the first question that we have is just kind of introducing your brand. Who are you? What do you do with your shop and your brand? And what made you decide to take your brand to the next level with a merch shop?
Okay. Well, where to start? Yeah, well, as you said, I'm Chris. And I really like space flight stuff. And that's been something that's been with me all my life. I mean, even when I was like 3 or 4 years old, I was bugging my folks about wanting books on space and wanting to watch everything I could about it. So a lot of years later, I'd never lost that interest, and I kind of had ended up in a job being a graphic designer. And, last year I got made redundant from the job I had been doing. And I kind of thought, wouldn't it be great if I could do something combining my kind of love of space stuff and my skills that I hope kind of pay the bills as a graphic designer. And I've been doing a blog for about 3 or 4 years now, writing about space. So I already kind of had a brand there and a bit of a following on social media, especially on Twitter. So, yeah, it seemed like a relatively low entry to kind of think, okay, I'm going to give this a go. I've been to some of the shops where, like at NASA centers and stuff, and I didn't really like some of the T-shirts they had there. They all felt a bit too corporate. So, yeah, I just thought, let's give it a go.
Cool. Yeah. So it's like pretty much like following your passion, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's
been your passion your whole life.
I think that's always a good thing to do. I've always worked kind of in the creative industries one way or another. And, it's a nice thing to do, to be able to work with something you really, really enjoy. I mean, being a graphic designer, sometimes you have to work with stuff you really don't enjoy. So
we know it.
And at least this time I know I can win an argument with the client. So, I just kind of thought I'd give it a go and see if I could do something which, firstly, that I liked better than the other shirts I was seeing, and secondly, hopefully other people liked as well.
What I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you kind of had this continual love since you were 3 or 4 years old for space and stuff like that, and that's what kind of led you from your career as a graphic designer to start kind of creating these exceptionally and one-of-a-kind designs. What are those designs inspired by? Are they inspired by current events, historical significance, like customer suggestions, or your own passions, or is it something else?
It's kind of a mix of all of those things. When I first started, there were a couple of initial ones. I've been kind of playing around with a few designs, trying to think, is this worth it, isn't it? So I had kind of 3 or 4 designs ready to go, and they were mainly dealing with like historic stuff, like back to Apollo sort of thing, because that's perennially popular with anybody that likes space, really. So yeah, there was a couple. There was a few things that I thought, well, you just can't get a T-shirt anywhere for this stuff. So like certain spacecraft or astronauts or whatever. So I just thought, yeah, well, I'll have a go, see if I can make that. But yeah, I mean, there's occasionally I'll do stuff for, I did one for the end of the Cassini program last year. And that was really just because it was something I'd followed for a lot of years, and I just felt I wanted to do something to mark the end of it. So yeah, it's a mix, and I do try and ask customers, and especially if I meet people out at events, what would you kind of like to see that I'm not currently doing? And sometimes the suggestions I can use. Sometimes a lot of times people say, "Oh, do something for this," and it's a current program where it's a brand or something, and obviously I don't use any existing logos and stuff like that. I don't use anybody else's IP, so it's all original stuff. So yeah, I kind of seem to get the ideas somehow. Some don't work, but most of them kind of do.
Yeah, that's something else I kind of wanted to speak on too. Is you have a very original style. Do you feel like that style's come from any previous inspirations that you've had? Like, is it a style that you've specifically gone after before in the past? Or I noticed there's quite a variety of designs you have too. It's not just one style, but they're all excellent and well laid out designs. What inspiration do you pull from?
Well, obviously, having kind of trained as a graphic designer and worked professionally for 15 years, I've done quite a lot of branding projects for all sorts of companies. So, it's always a case of trying to get a message across and trying to be really clear. So I guess I kind of brought those same sort of ideas to trying to do this. But one of the things I really enjoy doing is if I'm dealing with something that's historical, so something like Apollo from the 60s, I like to try and do a bit of digging and find some really nice 60s graphic styles, or find a font that's kind of has the right feel for it and stuff, and try and do something which kind of feels appropriate, rather than try and do everything in the latest brand new graphic styles, Or sometimes I'll see a particular, or I'll get an idea. Like I did a series recently about kind of space race spaceships, and that was really an attempt to do something where it looked like kind of a set of stickers, really, and do something which is quite nice and contained, but I could do a series of things all in exactly the same style.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, or any other style I see at the time that I think, sometimes you'll just see something and you'll think, hey, that would work really well for whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just a habit you get into as a designer. You're always kind of open to picking up stuff, being a bit of a magpie and kind of like grabbing hold of ideas wherever you see them. And, you always have a folder on your desktop, on your machine, kind of full of just little bits and pieces you grab when you see them on the internet. So yeah, it's just stuff like that, really.
Yeah, I think those inspiration points, the three of us are also graphic designers, and I definitely have a folder tree of fonts and ideas hanging out there. And leveraging that for inspiration all the time is key. Something we like to do on this podcast, and maybe you could help us out with it, is giving kind of tips and tricks to those who aren't as design savvy. So just kind of like if you could share some tools or brainstorming practices, things that you've seen yourself kind of learn over the years, and some of those tricks for people who aren't Adobe geniuses, or they just want to make a cool shirt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that's really important to say is, like, you don't have to try and do some really, really complex thing. You can do something. You only really need to put 2 or 3 words on a shirt, and that, if it's the right thing and it kind of catches what people are into at the time, or just resonates with people, you can do very well off that. I mean, I don't tend to do that myself because I find it easier to draw the pictures. But, people shouldn't be put off by thinking maybe I don't have the technical skills. And then what I always do is, I've always got various notebooks kicking around on my desk and all around the house, which I'm sure you guys have as well, and pencils everywhere. And just whenever I think of something, I'll just quickly sketch it down. And even if, I don't have time to work on it for a few days, it's like...